let's say you interview 10 people about a topic. There's some like banger quotes from people that you want to just like put on a poster and make sure everyone sees. And sometimes you note them down. But sometimes there's just so much data coming through that you miss it. Going through the synthesis process of like, okay, here are my 5 key takeaways, and this one's really important. I'll go to the notebook and say like, go find me a really good real quote from my users. That would take hours to crawl through all the stickies and find it. Having it just go lightning fast, analyze all those and be like, here's 5 options. And I go, number 3, that's great.
Let's just say you automate dimensions of what you take a 2-hour process to 5 minutes. You then get to accelerate the absorption of what it is that you want to learn, need to learn, and how to continuously get better at your craft and so on and so forth.
If you ask AI to just full-blown run your synthesis, it'll come back with, it's okay, but it's not great.
There's some pretty substantial amounts of time saved just generally and reallocated embedded within that, especially when you scale across a number of people.
I've built like custom GPTs to help write research plans based off of templates that we've been tweaking for years, that we can say this is the starting point.
As a leader, how do you do what you do while simultaneously thinking about different ways to directly or indirectly influence those around you, embrace that same mindset?
I think...
All right, AI with Alec, we got Chase Clark. So Calm is an app everybody knows, and Chase is a lead UX researcher for Calm. And on so many different fronts, since we've gotten to know each other, I think we've had some really interesting conversations about the intersection of artificial intelligence and a lot of different dimensions of how products are designed, built, iterated, user experience, you name it. So all that to say, Chase, thanks for being here, and really appreciate you taking the time to provide some perspective.
Yeah, happy to be here. Excited to chat, and I love talking about this stuff, so happy to do it.
All right, man. Well, let's get into it. So I think I'm going to oversimplify things to start and give you something to react to. So I think a lot of folks, generally speaking, whether they admit it or not, they can get really excited about artificial intelligence this and artificial intelligence that, and they read certain things and so on and so forth. And sometimes they get excited, sometimes they get fearful, sometimes they get confused. And I always find, like when we first spoke, I was like, oh, this guy clearly has his hands in the dirt and he's using this stuff, because the people that use these tools and these intelligent systems tend to have a perspective that's more nuanced. And so I just want to open it up and let you go anywhere you want to go in and around your experience and what you're excited about and what you're doing in and around the world of the balancing humans and all these fancy machines.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's been a cool journey lately. I feel like there's been a shift in terms of like how we've been asked to use AI at work versus like people experimenting with it on their own and not being sure like where the line was of like, should I be like exposing my usage or should I be kind of like keeping behind the scenes and things like that. And I think the most recent phase that everyone seems to be in is like leadership companies being like, yes, utilize this as much as possible, do more with less, in a good way, where it's like, hey, we want to optimize people's productivity and make sure people can do the things that they're more excited to do. So it's been a cool journey to go through like early adoption or people not wanting to adopt to having like a directive from the top being like, no, we're gonna do this. Maybe even everyone's a little behind and we should be playing catch up, and then experimenting with all the different tools available, trying to get better at the ones we've already got access to, and understanding like every step of the process, like where does it make sense to use this and where should we never use it, or where should we maybe use it later when it's better. And it really is just kind of like a case-by-case, step-by-step type of thing where we're just figuring out as we go. But when things click and work really well, they slot into your process pretty easily and they stick. It's like they're usually a kind of like forehead slappers where you're like, okay, yeah, we're going to use this from now on. Like, this is great. And then some where you try it out, it's not great. Some that people are still on the fence about. So it's been a really cool evolution over just the last couple of years to see it go from like people kind of using ChatGPT on the side to full-blown integration into workflow, new tools, new experimentation, and the permission and license to experiment with new things to see what we can get better at.
I love that. And what I would ask, because I think some people in my audience might be crystal on what a lead UX researcher at Calm, kind of focuses on and does day to day. And then there might be others that might be like, help me better understand it. So can you walk through just at a high level, what you do day to day, and then start introducing a little bit of like maybe where you've stepped into leveraging AI, and then also where maybe you've stepped in and you're like, you know what, this is not great. I'm going to go back to the human way. I'm going to go back to pen and paper, or however. And I have notes literally in front of me right now, pen and paper. That's my style, but I know that's not for everybody. So I wonder if you could do that a little bit for the audience.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a blend, and there's definitely things we're still doing on pen and paper, and I'm encouraging the researchers at Com to continue to do that way, because we're like breaking our process down like step by step and being like, where can AI help, and where do we want it to like be a very capable intern, and where do we want it to be like hands off, like not allowed to touch this stuff. And in terms of like what we do, we've got like a pretty clear playbook for user research at Com, where it's like we focus on customers, problems, concepts, and features. And we do that not always literally, but in that order. Basically, we want to get a foundational understanding of like who are your customers and who are your potential customers, what problems are they solving. So we spend a lot of time in like problem hunting land and like generative research and basically just talking to people, and then using that information to go back with the design team and say like, hey, we need to make new concepts to solve these problems that are out there. Or the things we already have they're doing good at this, but maybe we can improve them in this capacity to help solve that problem. So always looping back to customers and problems and making sure we understand that. So on my side of things, it's my job to make sure that not only the researchers understand that stuff, but we're kind of evangelizing that throughout like product and design and engineering and the whole org of saying like, don't forget, this is why people are coming to the app to download it. Because I think a good example for Com was, starts off as a meditation app, gets very successful, dives into sleep content, gets very successful with that. But when I joined, I was tasked, my first task was like, figure out who all our customers are. Why are people coming to the app and why are people leaving? Because, people leave your app. Sometimes it's not for them, but, there's definitely things you can dig into, understand like what are the unmet needs that people were expecting and didn't get. So long story short, we went and found out there's sure people coming to meditate, sure people coming to sleep, but then there's this huge group of people coming in that were just anxious and stressed out or feeling bad. They came in, they're like, I have bad feeling. I want you to take away bad feeling. And they didn't want to meditate. They didn't want to do this. So that kind of work is really cool for us because then we can jump into the ideation process and say, like, let's come up with new things to solve these old problems for these big groups of people. So that's a big part of what we do, and just keeping it always laser focused back to those problems, and using research to do that. We do a lot more qualitative and generative research, which is just fancy ways of saying talk to people. I think that's been ingrained in my design process for 10 plus years now. Of like the best thing you can do is just talk to your customers, talk to your potential customers. And some people they're like, oh, don't have your customers tell you what to build, and we never do that. We go and just talk to them about like, what are your problems? How can you not solve it? And then we go back and do the creative stuff of saying like, here's some things to do that. So that's kind of like a longer way of saying like what we do and focus on. The flip side of that is like the usability. That is also part of research, but we do that, but it's not our main focus because we're talking about mental health at scale. We do a lot more like, who are the people, what are the problems, what's not working, what can we do, and then we do usability testing, but that's more straightforward and simple of like, can you get from point A to B in a product, and that's like bread and butter stuff. In terms of like where we're slotting in AI specifically in the workflow, there's the workflows like planning, conducting, synthesizing, and sharing. Pretty straightforward, but a cool thing that AI has unlocked for us is basically like a new step of the process where it's like interacting with research instead of just like coming to me or other researchers on the team and saying like, hey, what do we hear from people about that? One specific thing we're using a lot is like the Google Notebook LMs, where we'll take a round of research and we'll take the transcripts from interviews, the research plans, the findings, and we'll jam them in a notebook and then let people interact with old research or even new research too. But if you want to talk to a research study we did 2 years ago about like how people can't wind down for sleep, it's all stored in there. And we've got presentations and documents that you can go through too, but it's cool because you can go in if you just got like specific questions like, hey, how many of those 50 people you talked to had watches? Or what were the trends that maybe we should be paying attention to that we missed? You can go back and talk to old research, which is really cool. So that's kind of like one of the newer things we're using it for. And then in the other phases, we're using it for some stuff, and some stuff we don't touch it. Like the synthesis phase is still kind of like a precious phase for us, where it's like get light assistance from AI, but that's still kind of like the magic of research and design is like that synthesized phase. So it's like you've talked to all these people, you've got all these data points, and it's like your job to like play detective with all the stickies on the wall, like what's the real story here, and then package that up. So we use it some there, for things that are like lower risk, where it's like, hey, a recent example was like we were talking about ChatGPT SDK coming out, where it's like you can have a Calm app in chat and people could talk to Calm inside of that. And so we're like, cool, let's start brainstorming on it. And I had just a first question was like, how are people using ChatGPT currently for mental health? Like, we know people are doing it like at scale, and what are they doing? So we ran a round of research where we just talked to 30 people, different age slices about like, hey, do you use it? If you do, what do you do? And they just walked through. They talked about like how they use it and why. And we had AI help us synthesize that because it's very straightforward. It's just like, what did you hear? You're not trying to find an opinion. You're not trying to come up with like a spark. It's just very cut and dry, straightforward. Like, here's what's out there, summarize it for me, and go from there. Because I think one cool thing we're seeing is that like, of all, if you're talking about like modern product design, of all the different roles where AI is coming in and you're getting to use it, I think research got more lucky in a way because a lot of research is analyzing big sets of text and data. And it's just a really cool tool to use for that. But again, it's like case by case. Like there's sometimes where we don't touch it, and there's sometimes where we're like, sure, let's run with it. So that's part of the picture.
That's fascinating. So let me jump into two areas. First area, so you mentioned Notebook LM and interacting with the research. Can you describe, and I know this is like a little bit of a case by case, it's kind of a ridiculous question, but at the same time, I think the audience might find this quite interesting. So when you introduce the ability to interact with certain types of research via Notebook LM, for example, what was the process what was the process previously, and who was interacting with research versus who wasn't? And then therefore now, are there different types of people, and like what's the enhancement there?
Yeah, I would say like not old world, but like pre AI, it'd be, you would do the research, you synthesize it, you put it into a deck, and then you have a share out, and we still do this, and we have a share out meeting with stakeholders. We go, here's what we wanted to learn, here's what we found, here's the deck, we walk through the findings, there's recommendations, and then we have a discussion at the end of like, hey, thoughts on that? Some live discussion going out through too. And then after the fact, those decks or docs would be like stored in a repository, and we still do that. We've got like a research repository. If you're curious about sleep, all this stuff is here. If you're curious about this, it's over here. So it's kind of self-serve, where people can ping me or another researcher and be like, hey, do you guys have research on, and we get these all the time still. It's like, hey, do you guys have anything about like kids income? Like what's up with that? And we go, yeah, it's in the repository here, or I'll just give them a link. And then it's up to them to go read through it, or we'll direct them to specific slides, and then they'll drop comments, and there's a discussion. So it's interactive in that sense. But with the new notebooks, they can kind of like skip us entirely in some instances and just say like, hey, instead of me pinging you with questions that you've got to remember from maybe 2 years ago that maybe was documented, or maybe it's just in the notes somewhere, they can go into the notebook and get pretty specific on stuff, or just get a refresher of like, hey, what do we hear here? And the other things the notebooks do that's cool is like, the main thing for me, for my goal of research, is to have people to remember it, have it to get in their heads and do things with it. So whatever way that I can get into someone's brain and like make sure they remember this stuff is helpful for me. So sometimes a 15-page Google Doc is not the best way to get into someone's brain. Like you can give it to them, but they might not get to page 14. Slides are a little bit better. They can like go through them in real time better. But for the notebooks, they can either just go talk to their question. And there's also like in the notebook, there's like studio elements that you can generate, and these are kind of hit or miss sometimes. And there's a curation element to it, and like sometimes it doesn't get it right, but you can generate like an audio recap of it. You can generate mind maps of these things, and you can kind of give people different ways to, basically get the information into their brains and like help them hopefully understand that. And there's parts of those that like it can generate like videos too, and it's not great. Like sometimes it's good and sometimes it's not. So it's kind of up to the researcher to be like not the gatekeeper, but the person to be like, hey, that video going out doesn't get the picture right. It's got some of it, but you're better off learning from this, that, or talking to me. So there's still a big human touch element there of like, when is it right to use it at every step, and when is it like, hey, you're better off just kind of talking to someone or making a document.
I appreciate you breaking that down, because I think sometimes we all fall victim of thinking AI is a silver bullet and it's magic and can do all these things. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But I think what you just described in part, because it's very transferable, the mechanism that you just described, it actually reminds me that my most recent interview previously was with Thomas Menard of L'Oreal, who's AI and lab leader, and now he's stepping into agentic infrastructure, et cetera. And he actually said something that was very similar. He was talking about the idea that an example was that when their people are driving to or from, right, commuting to work, that the companion, right, which is their language for dimensions of agentic infrastructure and otherwise, can essentially create a podcast that can distill the essence of the last 24, hours of emails. And therefore, imagine the time that saves, because now you're double timing because you can't look at your phone while you're driving. And I thought that was interesting because it's super tactical and specific, and it really does make a difference. And I think we've all experienced the amount of time that goes in, which is sometimes a little hidden, to all the work that's required to create the original document and or convert that document into a PowerPoint deck, or find the time to consume it. And then some folks are more auditory, or maybe someone wants to consume the information while they're driving home versus not having that time to do work. And therefore there's a tax that's applied to all of us pre some of these tools. And I think that it's really cool that you just described that, because I think there's some pretty substantial amounts of time saved just generally and reallocated embedded within that, especially when you scale across a number of people.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think like on a tactical level, like we listen to, if we do generate something like a podcast conversation of like a research recap or secondary research, we listen to every single one and make sure the story's right before sending it out to people. And it does save us time, because making a deck could take you days. It's like
so much time sometimes.
It takes forever. And sometimes that's part of the craft, and it's like that, if that's the best way to get it, like if you're talking to execs, you make a really nice deck and you make sure it like flows and you make sure you can talk through it. But if you just need people to understand something quickly, look at your choices. And we've got more choices now. And, not that people don't read, but it can be easier sometimes to just listen to something or just like have it be in a different format. And we're playing around with different versions of that. And one kind of like tongue-in-cheek fun one we've been doing lately is like, SOCOM has sleep stories where it's a bedtime story that somebody reads to you. And the team has been playing with like AI voicing of those as well. And so the research team reached out to our content team, and then we were like, hey, can we get access to 11 Labs, the website that they use to generate the voices, to basically take a 15-page Google Doc of research that we've written and then record like a fake sleep story of that content. So it's like kind of tongue-in-cheek, where it's like same idea of like generating an audio recap of it, but we have like the background music and the voice is a little sleepy. And so it's kind of a play on it, but it's just another way to kind of like get people to consume the information and understand it. And if that sticks, we'll use that for stuff. And if that's not good, it's still case by case, right? It's like, who's your audience? What's the information? How risky is it to get wrong? And what's your goal with it? And I think, we're constantly going through and saying like, what format for this? Do we make just like an image we could drop in Slack? Is this a full-blown presentation for the C-suite? Like, what are we trying to do? And we kind of just look at it every time and say like, what's the purpose? Who's it for? And then kind of like pick from our new tool set to like how to present the information.
That's absolutely fascinating. And I could belabor the point here, but I want to be cognizant of, I'm sure the audience wants to hear about some other things as well. But I want to, there's a couple of things I want to pick up on that another time. But you did say something that I really want to unpack too. That notion of synthesis is a very human thing, right? You're being a detective. You're looking at all the Post-it notes and all these different things. But then there's this other side of research. And like, can you walk the audience through how you think about when and where, and I'll just use the ridiculous statement, AI can step in and make dimensions of the workflow more effective, more efficient, and faster, so that you can focus more of the time on the things that you need to focus on and want to focus on, which are more of the superhuman stuff, and like how you think about the relationship between those two.
Yeah, I think one analogy that I use internally with our team is like thinking of AI as like a really good intern. And there's things you would give the intern and there's things you wouldn't give the intern. Like if let's say you're Nike and you've got an intern and you can tell, hey, go talk to people. We changed something in the templates and we think the shoes might fit different. So go talk to people and see if that's true. Come back, give me a report. They come back like 80% of people don't notice the sizing difference and it's all good and they're excited. But if you have an intern that comes to you and says, hey, I designed a brand new shoe, let's build it. You'd be like, no, you're not, that's not your job. So for us, like if we break down that process, like the planning process, I've built like custom GPTs to help write research plans based off of templates that we've been tweaking for years, that we can say, this is the starting point. Here's how we work. Here's who's involved. Here's what we want to go learn. Here's our framework, package all that stuff in a custom GPT, and then it'll come back with a research plan that is 80% there. And that could take me 2 hours sometimes to do, and now I can do it in like 5 minutes. And then you tweak it. And you go back through and you go, okay, like where did it, get it right? Where did it get it wrong? And so you're still like the curator. You're still the editor. But it saves a lot of time there. But it's based on a template that I've been working on for a while. And I feel like you've got to know at every step of the way, you got to know what good looks like. And if you know what good looks like, you can have someone help you bring it. Like if you're an expert chef and you bring people and you teach them how to make your stuff, you made the recipe and you know what good looks like, and they make a crappy version of it, you're going to tell them to go back and do it. But you need people to help you. And this like it's not people in this case, it's automation. So we do that a lot for planning. For conducting, I don't like to do much with conducting other than just like transcript. Like I want to get the raw text back, but we've looked at tools where like they're like AI moderated interviews, and I think I'm not sold on that yet, where it's like a robot actually conducting an interview for you. I think the conduct phase is kind of similar to the synthesis phase, where it's got to be really human touch. Like the questions have to be really great. It's got to be done really thoughtfully. You've got to know what to look for. You know what not to ask, what not to do. You've got to look for things on like facial expressions or like background noise, or like just like there's little things that you like AI is not going to pick up in the transcript. We'll test like we use ability test and like concept test things with people on video on usetesting.com, and we'll watch for cues. We're like, oh, there's something there. Like people got non-verbally excited about this part of that. Like let's dig into that some more. So I think those phases are still very like human touch and important, and then still synthesis where it's like it's our job to figure out like what the story is to tell, and then using AI to help maybe write some of the bullet points for the insights that we've prioritized and we've come up with. Because if you ask AI to just full-blown run your synthesis, it'll come back with, it's okay, but it's not great. And sometimes it's just wrong, or it doesn't know what to index on. So I think those phases, you've got to be really careful. And then the share out interacting phase, it helps you document, but it's helping you document the things that you know are good. So I think that's part of it. So every step of the way, and tool by tool, we're kind of going through and be like, for this, yes; for that, no; for this, maybe later; for that, never. So it's a very curated kind of thing.
So I love that you just called out a very specific task, if you will, that has gone from 2 hours, pre this era, to 5 minutes, because I think that that's what people need to hear. Is like it's not rocket science, but there are places where you can take a 2-hour task and turn it into 5 minutes. And that is unbelievable, right? Mm-hmm. Because you can add it up. I think what also you said there, and I'm going to hammer the nail. You want to be thinking a lot about automating and introducing AI into where you have a whole lot of taste and experience in what you know, right? Because you can detect when it's a little off center and, or God forbid, it hallucinates, et cetera. Because I think what that also does is, let's just say you automate dimensions of what you know, you take a 2-hour process to 5 minutes, you then get to accelerate the absorption of what it is that you want to learn, need to learn, and how to continuously, get better at your craft, and so on and so forth. And so I don't know if that kind of makes sense to you, and that's kind of where you're going with it, but like, that's where I think things get really interesting.
Yeah, no, agreed. I feel like, I want to make sure we're coming up with really compelling insights that people can't ignore, and we're getting into the right hands. I don't want to spend 8 hours making a deck look nice, and we still have to do that. So it's an example of like, can I automate that part where it's like there's nothing special and magical about. I mean, it's if you can make a nice looking deck, cool, and you want to have a a nice presentation, but like that's not worth as much of your time as like getting the story right and then saying like, hey, all right, and that's, you mentioned like pen and paper. I encourage everyone on research to do the synthesis part, pen and paper. So like take notes on hand. They're sticky on the wall I'm looking at now. I've got a whiteboard here. Or like Fig Jam is another great version of it. Yeah. It's messy. You're seeing patterns. You can move things around. So the synthesis phase is still like, we've got a transcript of all the interview conversations that we can plug into whatever we want. But I'm still like listening to the interviews, whether I'm sitting in them, conducting them, or I'm watching them recorded, and I'm making notes on paper or on Fig Jam or on the wall. And then taking that and be like, okay, the story is boom, 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 boom. Here are the top 5 key takeaways. Here's the flavor of it. And then lightly leverage AI to help, bolster that. Like a cool thing that we can do now that took a lot longer in the past would be like, let's say you interview 10 people about a topic, and there's some like banger quotes from people that you want to just like put on a poster and make sure everyone sees. And sometimes you note them down, but sometimes there's just so much data coming through that you miss it. And so if I've gone through the synthesis process of like, okay, here are my 5 key takeaways, and this one's really important, I'll go to the notebook and say like, go find me a really good real quote from my users that represents this really well. That would take hours sometimes to crawl through all the stickies and find it. And sometimes you still do that, but having it just go lightning fast, analyze all those and be like, here's 5 options. And I go, number 3, that's great. And it's real. It's a real quote. I was in the meeting. I heard the person say it. I remember them. I'll go find their picture and put it next to it. That's really cool to be able to just like go jump in that text, but you're directing it very specifically. It's like surgically where you're like, this is the point I want to get across. Give me 5 options. I'll pick the best one, and it's got to be real. And it's cool because, not cool, but depending on the tool you're using, I've done it with chat, and it will make up fake quotes, and you've got to be careful. It'll be like, here's a quote. And I'm like, was that real? And it's like, no. I'm like, I said.
And you're like, well, why'd you give it to me?
I know. And then
what's wrong with you?
Notebook only knows what you put in it, so it gets real quotes. And I love that about Notebook. I think Notebook's one of the best tools we've been using. It's like so simple, it's not flashy, and it's nothing crazy, but it's just what you put in it, you can dig through, and it's not going to go make stuff up, and it gets stuff wrong sometimes, but it's really cool to be like, what did our people say? Cool. I wanted to get that anyway. Let's go put it in here.
So I'm going to jump all over that, especially for the non-technical leaders that are in my audience. So what Chase just said there, that's a huge point. So it's grounded, and I'm sure there's a better way to say it, but it's grounded in the knowledge that you have and you've given to it. And therefore it doesn't go read a bunch of other books, right? It only speaks to the books you gave it that are off the shelf that you gave it and say, hey, these are the books. So I think that's huge. And I think a lot of people don't necessarily realize that there are different ways to do that, right? And the mechanism of the large language model that understands the relationship between words and so on and so forth is one thing. But isolating, here are the 5, dimensions of knowledge I want you to only use is a huge thing. So yeah. My next question, unless there's something you want to jump in on that, Chase,
just really technically for that.
Yeah.
I do love notebooks for that, where you can basically, a good notebook for us is like, we'll give it the research plan that had our goals and our questions in it. We'll give it the transcripts. We might give it like some OKRs of things we're trying to achieve. We'll give it, like our framework of how we like to approach things. I might go pull like an academic paper about the topic we're talking about and put that in there that I know is like, thumbs up and curated. And then you can customize the prompt to where you're like, hey, you are a product designer or a staff UX researcher, or you're all these different things, and think through the lens of job to be done, keep it short, go. So we've kind of like crafted our approach to those notebooks, and they're really cool. And it's just, again, it's not the fanciest tool of all the things available right now, but it's just like the ability to curate what goes into it and just focus on that is really cool.
It's huge. And so let's go one click into this, but to the side. So everything you've just described, I think in many respects is why you and I, when we first met, just saw eye to eye on all sorts of things in this area, because we're both hands in dirt. We're using it. We know what the magic is and what it isn't, and yada, yada, yada. And we're working through it together, right? We're all figuring it out as we go. There are a lot of people out there for a variety of reasons that are human and otherwise, that don't have that same level of comfort just yet. And maybe they would if they had an opportunity or could overcome a certain barrier, or what have you, to step in and start to really experiment and feel comfortable to learn and iterate. Because once you kind of do it yourself, nothing compares. But what I would ask you is, as a leader, how do you do what you do while simultaneously thinking about different ways to directly or indirectly influence those around you, those that report to you, those that are your peers, whatever, to maybe embrace that same mindset, that same approach, that same style, right? Because if someone in your orbit is spending 2 hours doing something that will take 5 minutes, it's kind of like, hey, so how do you do it? What do you do?
I think a big part of it is like experimenting and trying things out, and like being honest with yourself and the team of like when something's working or when a thing worked. If you tried a new tool and it like didn't really get you much farther, nobody cares. It didn't work. Throw it in the trash. I think we're constantly experimenting, but I think people notice when something really works and it kind of like solves a problem that they didn't want to spend a bunch of time on. Because I think there's like, kind of back to my point about like, of the different roles you could be, AI could maybe step on your toes a little bit. Like I think for designers, they're having more of a mixed feelings about using AI, because part of it is the craft part of it, and part of it is like, okay, what do you commoditize in terms of design? Like, what do you want to keep precious? And they've kind of got to go through and figure out when it makes sense to use it and not. And I think I've seen people be a little bit more hesitant on the design side of stuff because that's their craft, and that makes a lot of sense. But then there's part of the process where it's like, what do you not want to spend a lot of time on, and what do you want to spend a lot of time on? And one example that we've done recently that's like kind of like now clicked into our workflow is like AI prototyping. So we've in the past made Figma prototypes. They can take a long time to build the interactions and build like any kind of logic trees. Like whenever you go to design, you're like, hey, can you make a full end-to-end prototype of this in Figma so we can test it with customers? But it's dynamic. They're like, ooh, that's going to take days.
Like, oh, I could.
You can, but do they want to prioritize that, or do they want to prioritize, a different project or a different part of the project they're working on? So one thing that I've started doing a couple months ago. So we've got Calm Sleep. It's a new app out. It's all about sleep. It's our first new app in a long time. It's really exciting, and we're trying to learn new things we can do with it. And a big element of Calm Sleep is like you go through onboarding, you answer questions, and it makes a daily plan for you to like get better sleep. And that happens during the day and at night. So it gives you things to do during the day to get better sleep. It gives you stuff at night to do, and there's all the content you can just listen to. And so one thing we were curious about was just like how to continue to make those like suggestions better. So I took the onboarding flow, Figma screens. I went to Lovable and I made a prototype of the same exact flow, and it looked 85% right. Like we don't care about testing the visuals right now. We know the designers made beautiful screens. It's more about like testing the information people put into those screens and then seeing what the output is like. So I took the logic from our current flow of like the actual what's in the app, put that into an AI generated prototype, made the exact same screens, exact same questions. And what's cool with Lovable is that you can connect it to another app called Supabase, which is like databases. And it's not even an AI thing. It's just you can make real databases, but you can connect it to prototypes. So in old world, where if you're trying to make a prototype that like feels real and it can answer actual logic questions of an onboarding flow and generate plans for you, it's smoke and mirrors. It's like Wizard of Oz best case scenario, or it takes you 2 weeks to build it and it hurts, versus building one in Lovable where I took the logic, baked it into the prototype, made all the same screens in like 20 minutes, and then built an actual little database of just like the content and recommendations that we actually use in the app. So mashed all that together in a matter of like a day or two, and then we had a functioning prototype that I could test on usersetting.com where people could go through, here's the new app, answer these questions, they're the real questions, and we would generate plans, and then we'd have them go through and identify like which recommendations they would never do and why, or if they would stop doing things over time. And we learned all this stuff that we could either have tested with like a real build gap, which would have taken longer because you gotta wait for releases, and if you want to iterate, it takes longer. It just does. Or if we had done a Figma version, that would have taken forever and not done the same thing. But using Lovable and Supabase to make an actual functioning prototype that we just, at the end of the day, we just threw it out because we weren't going to like design it visually like that, but we learned a lot of stuff from it. And since then, the team has been doing a lot more AI generated prototypes to learn from, not to be like, hey, we should make it look like this, but more like build it so we can test it with users, see what works, what resonates, what doesn't, iterate, and then take it to the shop and build the real thing in Figma with designers hands-on. But we've learned with these disposable, easy to spin up prototypes. And I think prototyping with it has been awesome at the concept level. It's like, hey, do you care about this? Does this work? What's going on here? So speed to learning in that phase got way faster. And it can be like maybe not the most beautiful looking screens you've ever seen, but it's not supposed to. It's just about like, does it work? Does it function the right way? Do people even value it? And then if it does, check these boxes, move on to like the craft part of it and make it perfect,
It's a fantastic example. So speed to learning for sure got faster. Could you, and again, this is directional, but could you speculate on what it would have taken in terms of maybe just like the time to have the same quality of learning that would have happened, versus what you're now able to do with these AI prototypes?
Yeah, I mean, for that example specifically, I don't think we could have built a prototype in Figma that would have been able to be it wouldn't have been actually personalized and using real logic. It could have been like halfway there, but then we wouldn't have gotten good learnings. Like if I had you go through it and you just landed on like a pre-generated plan, it wouldn't be personalized. And you would be like, well, this doesn't work for me. It would be like, yeah, we know it's not your plan. So we could have even done that. You could have done it like we've done stuff in the past where like we tested an onboarding flow for Calm like years ago, where we had all these different options, and basically we had people on a live call and I was just the interface. I was the UI. I would ask them questions, they would say things out loud, and it was all like sticky notes style. And that took a long time and it wasn't quite as good and it was slower. So for us to be able to like make a prototype that used real logic and spat out actual content and recommendations that are in our system, that took me maybe 2 days to build, so much faster, versus like we probably wouldn't have even done it. We would have been like, well, let's put a release out in the App Store. We'll talk to the lifecycle. They'll send out emails. It'll take a week. we'll get people signed up on Zoom, we'll talk to them. That'll take days, weeks, versus being able to do that in way less time. It's really cool.
Absolutely. And I'm going to put words in your mouth, and you can obviously push back and say, hey, that's not exactly accurate. But what I'm hearing there in that example is it's a combination of there's dimensions of automation that compresses a process, or dimensions of a process that then move faster and more efficiently, et cetera. But I think it's also augmentation of you all and creating what effectively is a net new set of insights and data, et cetera, that very well could create, taking it all the way down the track, net new revenue that maybe wasn't there or wasn't going to be found if and when you guys didn't do what you did. Maybe there would have been other ways to do it, but that's a pretty compelling demonstration of the value that AI can create in the hands of a number of folks like yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
Nailed it. All right, good. I was hoping you might say that. So I want to be cognizant of time. Chase, is there anything else that you want to say to the audience that connected to our conversation or otherwise that is exciting about what you all have going on at Calm, and or anything in the area of helping people better understand what you clearly understand about how powerful and extraordinary these tools and intelligent systems can be when you really commit to start using them?
Yeah, I think one thing that I'd love to kind of chat through is I think we've spent a lot of time today talking about how we've used it internally on process to make our internal process better, but there's still this kind of ethically gray area of what to do in your product for people. And so we've done a lot of research on AI internally of again, earlier I was talk to your customers. That is baseline thing you should be doing constantly. And one thing that we want to make sure we don't do wrong is put AI into the app in ways that people don't want it, or it doesn't make sense, or we feel like we're tricking them. So we've done research with our customers where we go out and talk to them about hey, we've got AI voices. Let's talk about, is the quality bar there? Do you hate it? Are you okay with it? Or when should we use it? When should we not use it? So a lot of it's not a binary thing of yes or no. For AI voices specifically, we talked to users, customers, and we said hey, turns out a lot of people couldn't tell the difference between a real recording and generated recording, because we'll use our actual talent, and they have given us permission to hey, use my AI voice to read this script that we wrote together. And people were largely okay with it in research, or some people more supportive than expected. But then there's nuance to it. We learned that people are I don't want to have AI talk to me when it's about something more serious. If you're giving me a meditation on grief or life events, I want human touch all the way. If you're giving me breath work, box breathing, sure, the robot can give me the really basic stuff that's who cares or whatever. So we've done research around our customers and saying where should we not mess with this? Because Calm for lots of people is a really safe space, and there's things we've learned, whether it's AI or not, that we don't do in the app, because it's such an important thing for people, and it's a life-changing app for people who use it, that they're don't you dare do X, Y, and Z. And we wouldn't know that unless we talk to them. And what we can do, instead of building something and spending a long time on it and putting it out there and then getting CX tickets and App Store feedback I hate this, how dare you, we can just talk to them up front and be hey, we're thinking about doing this. And people are that's cool, or they're don't you dare. And we're cool, we didn't even go to engineering yet. You can learn a lot from just saying, and I know I mentioned earlier, we would never just build what our people tell us to build, but I think the flip side of that is helpful, where make sure you don't make your people mad by it, especially with AI. AI is a very hot topic for people, and internally we can do all these things to make our process faster, but externally we're being very ethical and careful about where would we use AI for this? We're not letting AI write meditation scripts. We're not letting it, talk to you about your child moving out of your house. We're using it for maybe a fun bedtime story or some basic stuff, and we're just making sure we're keeping our pulse on what are you okay with, and where are we not going to cross the line? So from an ethical standpoint, I don't even know if it's ethical. It's more just preference of your users. We're really kind of making sure that we're talking to them first, and then making sure we're not overriding any of their preferences with just jamming AI into things where they don't care about it. So we're testing customer facing AI every step of the way. We're working on a project now where it's a better search function in the app based on AI using emotions, and people are really positive about that. Like, yeah, help me find the stuff to do, but the thing I go and listen to, it's a real person who sat in the studio and wrote this beautiful script that's going to help me be a better person. So it's just finding the balance.
I think that's so compelling, and I'm glad you brought that up, because I think a lot of companies and a lot of, I'm sure, folks that are going to watch this and listen to this, there's a lot of thought about the difference between leveraging AI infrastructure and otherwise to achieve internal, operational, or otherwise kind of benefits. And then when it comes to consumer or customer or what have you facing stuff, that comes with different stakes. And I think it's really neat the way that you continue to talk about just being superhuman and talking to the users and talking these different dimensions through. Because I personally, I'm one of those people that, generally speaking, I wish more companies would use what they know about me that I trust, right, in ways that are advantageous to me, right, that benefit me. And I would love for them just to ask and say, hey, like, I always use the ridiculous examples, but Chipotle, like I love Chipotle. I go there all the time. And it's kind of odd to me. Like, I get an alert when they know I'm physically, about to, go in and walk in and do my thing. And then I have to order every time, almost the same order, and there's something about that where I'm like, come on, Chipotle, like, just ask me, you know what I mean? Like, just like, hey, Coughlin, like, what's the deal? And I'd be like, oh, thank you so much. And I would probably say way too many things, like, okay. But I think it's neat that you do that. I think that's really, it's an awesome technique, and I'm glad you shared that.
Yeah, I feel like we can't do it enough. You can't talk to your people often enough. I feel like it's not just researchers' job. It's like design should do it, products should do it, engineering loves to sit in on it. So I think that's such a valuable thing, especially when we're talking about nuanced things. Like, there's a difference between every company trying to jam AI into their products, and you're like, I don't care. Okay, Instagram, you've got AI in the search, whatever, I don't care. Versus offending people with AI in a safe space, like a Calm app, where it's like, hey, I rely on this for very specific things in my life, and I really don't want you to mess it up. So Calm is really careful about not rocking the boat in that way a lot of times, and this is just a whole new arena for us to be like, okay, AI in the app, we're going to make sure we put it in the right places, but we're also going to be really careful, because again, there's a difference between offending someone and just putting something in that they don't care about. Like, if I don't care about a new AI feature in an app, whatever, but if it ruins my safe place, I'm going to fire that app and get one that doesn't do that.
Yeah, you're 100%. And I think what you also said, which I'm going to bring it back and just give you more credit on this one, is culturally, high performance team culture, transparent culture, a lot of decentralization of knowledge, allowing people to consume things via Notebook LM and so on and so forth. And maybe not have to, not that you or your team ever would be a bottleneck, but the more those different folks that you described can understand the nuance of the things that you're learning through talking to people, I think the better off everybody is,
Yeah, agreed.
Okay. All right. Well, unless there's anything else, Chase, this is going to be a very interesting episode for folks to dig into, because you've taken it from here to here to here to here, which I want to thank you for that, because I think, unfortunately, a lot of times we can get into the strategy and the vision and the all this stuff up here about AI. But I think you've given us, many super tangible examples that I think will help a lot of people better understand tactically as well as strategically how to introduce AI into their world. So is there anything else you want to share? Any, how do people can find you, plug Calm. Everyone always lights up when we say Calm. So I was excited, obviously, for that. But anything else you want to add before I shut this episode and conversation down?
Yeah, I'd say on my LinkedIn, we can put that in the comments or whatever. That's the best way to get a hold of me. But yeah, go check out Calm Sleep. So there's a free trial. We're really excited about this new app. I feel like it's something that just touches everyone. I've interviewed people over the years about sleep, and you can throw a stick and hit 10 people who have trouble sleeping at some point and at different parts of their life. So we're really excited for that one to come out. And again, it's just our newest thing that we're the most excited about, and we'd love to get feedback on it. And we're just trying to learn as much as we can, but excited for that. We've been working on it for a long time, and it's our first separate app from the main Calm app ever. I said it a long time earlier, but it's the first one. So more to come on future versions of that and like other things we're working on. But that's what we're excited about right now.
I'm signing up, man. I'm a different human when I get a full like 7.5+ hours of
Oh
sleep.
yeah.
And if, I mean, I'm a grumpy, you don't want me with less than that. So thank you, Chase. I'm signing up and I'll keep everybody posted on it. I hope everyone else that watches this does the same.
Cool. Awesome. Thanks, Alec.
Good to see you.
You too.
Take care. Bye.